Hey everyone, it's Owen. Welcome back. This is my 12th video in my Java tutorial series, and in this episode we will be going over the for loop. So what a for loop is it's a loop that will be executed a certain amount of times based on the values and information that you have inside of its parentheses, much like the if, not the if statement, but the parentheses are like the if statement. So we're going to start out by typing for and then parentheses, and then we'll put our brackets. So inside the for loop we have three expressions. The first one is going to be it's going to be our variable that we're going to use. In this case I should actually declare it up here, int I, and then here we're going to initialize I to be equal to 0, and this is called our first one, the initializing expression, and that's simply what it does. It initializes our variable and in this case sets it to 0. Our next one is going to be the control expression, and in the control expression we're going to make it I equals less than or equal to 100, then then 100, and then we'll put another semicolon after that. And then we'll have our third expression, which is going to be our step expression. And we'll just put I plus plus, which means it's going to increment it. It's going to increment I once every time the loop executes. So I'll come back in here. I didn't talk about this one very much. This one, this whole thing is basically like you're going to initialize I to be equal to 0, and then this is going to test. It's almost like an if statement. If I is less than or equal to 100, then it's going to perform this code, and it's going to when it's incrementing each time, this is going to go up by 1. So it's going to be I is equal to 1, and then it's still going to this value is still going to be true, so it's going to continue to execute over and over again. And in this case, I'm going to actually set this to 1, because in this case it's going to run through the code 100 times. And just to show you that, I'm just going to do something simple here. We're just going to print out, and we're going to print out I. We're going to print out I. So if I compile this and then come back here and run it, you can see it printed out I 100 times. We have some of it gets cut off, but we have 100. So when you're doing something like this, you need to be careful of your control expression. You need to make sure that at some point your control expression is going to be equal to false. Otherwise you're going to create an endless loop that'll go on forever. And although that's, you can do that, like as long as 1 is greater, or 1 is supposed to be greater. 1 is greater than 0, and if we were to compile that, that's always going to be a true statement. So it's just going to keep going and going and going and going forever, until of course you stop it. And like I mentioned earlier, if you ever make a loop, you need to come down here, hit reset, and that's going to stop it, clear it out, and then close it. So just be careful. If you ever, if something doesn't seem like it's working, go back, check your loops, make sure that the control expression is at some point going to be equal to false. So that said, I want to talk just next about a quicker way to do this. I guess you can consider it quicker. I don't consider it to be too much quicker, but that is like in the if statement, I told you that you could get rid of brackets. Well, that is also true for the for loop, but of course only if there's one line of code or underneath it, or one statement, like an if statement, for example. And in the if statement can actually have, I believe, I'll get back to that later. I'll get back to that after I do this. But if I were to do whatever I had here, which was print 100, we can compile that, and it'll compile and run just the same as if it did have brackets. But what you can also do is, if, say we wanted to, print out this code, and ignore the white right here, it'll fix itself once you're done. But let's say we have, let's say we only want to print it up until 50. So if I is less than, if I is less than or equal to 50, then it's going to execute this line of code, and seeing as I'm only going to use one line here, we can also leave off the brackets for that. And it's going to print out I. So we compile this, you can see we compile completely fine with no warnings, and it'll print only to 50. Oh, my bad, I did not, forgot to fix my control expression back. See, something like that could happen to you. So, as long as I is less than or equal to 100. So, well, hopefully you guys saw that. You know, it goes to 50 and then stops. So we'll clear it out. And then, I believe you can also even put brackets in here. And let's see, can you compile that? Yes, you can compile this. This is kind of weird looking because the coloring's off, but say we want to print out high. And as you can see, we can still have this whole if statement underneath that one for loop which doesn't actually have any brackets. So it looks weird, but it is something that you can do, and I figured it's something worth mentioning. So the next thing I'm going to talk about, however, is nested loops. And what a nested loop is, I'll just, I'm going to put another bracket back here because I like the way it looks better. But what a nested loop is it's a loop inside of a loop. So if I were to go like, let's see, sorry, if I were to put it system.out.println, and then we'll just have it print 1. And then I can also put a nested loop inside here, which will do, I'm actually just going to copy this loop. And yeah. So inside here we'll have it do system. There we go. And that's going to print 2. So what this is going to do though, this is not going to simply print 200 because you have two 100 loops. It's not going to be equal to 200. What it's going to do instead is every time that one of these loops executes, it's going to execute this loop 100 times, or whatever value you have in here. So this one is actually going to be it's actually going to be ran 10,000 times. 100 times 100. So if I were to go like this, print this out, 2. See, it's so long that you can't actually see the ones being printed out because it's going to print out ones first and then it's going to print out twos. And so, I just figured that's worth mentioning also. I seldom use those, but I haven't also done, a ton of things with loops. I do actually, they're very useful, but I never really nest them. But you might want to sometime. And with all that, that's pretty much all I want to talk about, other than one piece of information. A lot of people make the mistake of typing their for loop. Let's see, if I go like this, and I'm finishing, and I come up here and I type in a semicolon. Now this won't work. It will, but what it does, it's not going to work like a for loop. What this is actually going to do is, it's actually kind of interesting. Well, I deleted, here, if I were to come down here to system.out.println, I'll fix my mistake I just made. I keep misspelling system. If I compile this and I come down here and I print that out, it's going to print out 101. Because it treats this as a single line of code and nothing underneath it. It's so basically, I have semicolons here, so it's essentially, it's not one line of code, it's actually, it's the equivalent to, like, if I were to go like this, it's the equivalent to just going like this, and it's going to do I is long, and then I is less than or equal to 100, which is like a useless statement in this sense, and it's going to do plus I. It's somewhat similar to that, but it's basically, it's treating this, it's basically forgetting it's a for loop, and it's just kind of treating this part. But that's a common mistake that people can make. It was the very first thing I did, not with a for loop, but with an if statement, so I figured I'd point that out there. And that is the case with all the loops, which statements, if statements, everything. But that's all I want to talk about in this episode. So, thank you for watching, and I'll get back to you later.